So let's get started. I'll start with my introduction. I am Syed. I work as a corporate trainer, mentor, and SME. I have 11 years of experience working on .NET full stack. Uh, I've done trainings for various companies like Cognizant, Capgemini, DXC, Exaway, Wipro, and so on. Today, we will be discussing about Selenium and specifically how we can write the test, automation test to be specific, using Selenium as our tool. And we will see a demo as well, wherein we will switch into Visual Studio and we will create a test project with the help of Selenium. We'll also test out a small web form using Selenium. So here is the agenda for just 1 minute. So here's the agenda for today's session. We are going to start with the introduction. That is, we will go with first the introduction to automation testing. That is, what do we mean by automation testing? We'll have a look at that. And then we will specifically look into how we can do automation testing with the help of Selenium, how Selenium will be useful to us as an automation tester. Then later on, we will see how we can set up our test environment using Visual Studio. I'm going to be using Visual Studio 2022, but you can also try this out in the previous versions of Visual Studio like 2019 as well as 2017. And then we'll see how we can create a basic unit test with the help of Selenium. So we'll just try to create a hello world kind of test with Selenium. We'll just use NUnit as our testing framework. So our test is going to be written with the help of NUnit. And C# will be the programming language that we are going to use for our test. And finally, we will also test a contact form. We are going to go ahead and write a unit test for a form. So let me just show you that contact form application that we'll be using. So here, I've already created one application using ASP.NET MVC. It's a basic application. Let me just walk you through it. SLN is an extension for solution. When you create a project using Visual Studio, you basically get a solution file that keeps tracks of all the projects which are part of the current solution. So if I open the solution file, it's going to load up all the projects which are created as part of that solution. So here's my solution. We'll just move this side. So if I go to Solution Explorer, which basically shows me all the projects that I have, you can see that there is just one project that I have. It's an MVC application created using model, view, and controller. We are not going to see how to create this application. Rather, we will write the test around this particular application. So it's a basic application. Let me just start it. So I'll go to debug menu and say start debugging. I have a message here that my screen is not visible. Can someone confirm it is visible or not? It is visible, right? So some of you are not able to see the screen. I can see one or two messages here. Can you once maybe check your network or try rejoining the message, because most of the messages here says that my screen is visible. Thank you, guys. It's like a Visual Studio stuck. Let me close and reopen it once. So, all right, here is the application. It's a basic template for .NET projects that we get. And I have a contact page over here, which basically accepts a name and an email address and a message. So, hello, maybe welcome to. Then we click this send button. And once it is successfully submitted, we get this message. So we are going to test out this form using Selenium. All these fields that you can see over here, which are filled manually. If I'm doing a manual testing, we basically go over here and as a manual tester, we fill out these values by typing. And then we click this button to see whether we are getting the proper response or not. But this thing, with the help of Selenium, we can automate it. We can automate the complete interaction with this particular web form, like going to each one of these text boxes, filling out these values, and then even clicking this particular button. And even we can check whether we are able to get this message once we submit this form successfully or not. So if you're using Java, then you can use Eclipse. Uh, I'm going to use .NET and C#, so I will be using Visual Studio. Sumit. So I have a very small presentation. We will run through this presentation and then afterwards we will switch into Visual Studio and we are going to see how we can test out that contact form using Visual Studio. So let us go through this presentation quickly. So before we go ahead and understand how we can write a test using Selenium, let us first understand what do we mean by automation testing. So in automation testing, basically what happens is we are going to use certain software tools to test our application. Unlike in manual testing, what happens is there will be a person who will open up a given page and he will fill out the forms and then he will observe the output generated. Then based on that, he will provide his feedback whether the test is passed or failed or there is any bug or something, right? In automation testing, this work is done by certain software tools. There are various software tools which can be used for automation testing. Selenium is one such tool, but there are others like there is Appium, there is also Cucumber, and so on. Our session is for Selenium, so we will have a look at how we can achieve automation testing using it. Now, these tests are executed automatically. That means I can set these tests to be executed in my CI and CD pipeline as well if I want to. There is no need of a human interaction in order to run these tests. So I just have to click a button, say run. It's going to go ahead and open up that web page, and then it is going to interact with that particular web page. Automation tests basically are used for simulating user actions and interactions, like a user going to the web page, clicking a certain hyperlink. Like if I'm a user, um, these are some of the operations that I'm going to do on this website as a user. Like I'll click on this home hyperlink to go to home page, or click on this contact hyperlink to go to contact page, or type in something into these text boxes, right? These are the user interactions which are going to be there with my application. I can write or simulate these user interactions with the help of automation testing. We will basically write some scripts to simulate as if a user is interacting with my application. So this basically eliminates any human errors. So as a human, if we have to test out a lot of functionality, there is a possibility that I may miss out one or two tests, or I may mistype some of the values that needs to be put into my text box. I can eliminate all of these human errors with the help of automation testing. My test results are going to be more reliable and more accurate. Selenium is not the only framework that is available. There are other frameworks as well that you can explore, but it is widely adopted. These are some of the benefits of using automation testing over manual testing. First thing is speed. So with automation testing, you can run hundreds of tests faster compared to a human being going ahead and performing all those tests. It is also cost saving because you are going to reduce the number of people who are involved in writing the tests, and these tests are executed by the machines. So it is cost saving as well as you get better efficiency. That means you can run these tests repeatedly for a number of times as per your requirements, and you get better accuracy as well with the help of automation tests. Now let us understand where does Selenium fits into automation testing. So Selenium is basically an open source framework. That means you get good community support. There are many extensions available for Selenium, and there is a lot of tools available that can be used along with Selenium. And Selenium is a framework for web application testing. Now, this is important. We have mobile applications, we have desktop applications, we have web applications as well, right? Uh, Selenium is basically used for testing web application. So as you can see here, the one that I am showing you, it's a web application. It's running in my browser, right? So I can write the test for this web application with the help of Selenium. Please note that it is not for desktop applications or mobile applications. Selenium also supports writing tests using multiple programming languages. So using Selenium, you can go ahead and write your test using so many different languages, like you can use C# as the programming language for writing the test. You can use Java as your programming language for writing your test. There is also options to write it in Ruby and Python and so on. So there is support for writing these tests in multiple different programming languages. You also have options for executing these tests under different browsers. Like you can write the tests in Selenium, say to be executed on Chrome as the browser, or say your Firefox as the browser, or Internet Explorer as the browser. So you have the facility of running these tests under different browsers. So it basically allows testers to automate browser interactions. So all forms of browser interactions, like opening a browser, closing a browser, navigating from one URL to another URL in the browser. All these browser interactions you can automate with the help of Selenium. Apart from browser interactions, you can also validate various web elements, like you can go and search, say a given H1 element is present or not. For example, if you go to this particular page, I can check whether this contact us text is present or not. What is the title of this page? If you see here, there is a title for this particular page, right? You can see there is a title here. So you can go ahead and verify whether this title is contact or not. Right. So these are the kind of things that you can do. You can even go ahead and select and interact with any of the form elements. Like this is a form, I have 3 text boxes and a button. You can go ahead and interact with them with the help of, again, Selenium. So Selenium is not one particular tool or API. It's a suite. It comes with various tools. One such tool is called as Selenium WebDriver. We are going to see a demo on Selenium WebDriver, like how we can use Selenium WebDriver to write our tests. And then there is also an IDE, which helps us in writing the tests. Yes, I will show you a demo from the scratch. Namrata. I have a very small presentation, just 7-8 slides. After that, we will switch to coding part only. You're welcome. So there is an IDE. So this particular IDE helps you in writing Selenium tests. We can use that IDE as well. Then there is Selenium Grid. This allows you to execute your tasks in different platforms under different systems. You can do that with the help of Selenium Grid. In this webinar, we'll be focusing on WebDriver. So how to instantiate a Selenium WebDriver, create our tests using the Selenium WebDriver, and check whether our tests are passing or not, again using Selenium WebDriver. So now coming to Selenium WebDriver, it's basically a programming interface for developers. So instead of directly interacting with a browser and your application, the Selenium WebDriver is going to act as a high-level object through which you can interact. And then in turn, it interacts with your web browsers. You can see a diagram over here. So as a developer, you're going to utilize Selenium WebDriver to write your tests. Whatever test scripts that you're going to have, you will be writing it using Selenium WebDriver. Then Selenium WebDriver is going to forward those to your browser drivers. Each browser has a different driver. Like there is a Chrome driver for Chrome as the browser. There is also a Gecko driver for Firefox and so on. So my Selenium driver that I'm going to use, it is going to interact with my browser's driver for performing various operations. To do that, it basically you converts all the commands into JSON and forwards that with the help of JSON wired protocol. And then the browser driver is going to go ahead and use the native browser API to interact with my browsers. For example, a browser written using C#. So all my commands will be converted to that C# scripts and it will be executed against my browser. If a browser engine was created, let's say using JavaScript, then all my commands will be converted to it and executed against my browser. It's going to be a two-way communication. Once the browser generates some responses, that will again be forwarded back to my driver. So I can retrieve the output which was generated and I can work with that. So Selenium WebDriver, as you can see over here, communicates with your browser using the browser specific drivers. These are going to vary from one browser to another. Like for Chrome, there is a different driver. For Firefox, there is a different driver, and there are different implementations of this WebDriver. Selenium WebDriver basically is a library that can be used using Java as the language. You can use C#, you can use Python, Ruby, and JavaScript as well. If you're using C#, there is a DLL file that is available, which you can add a reference into your project. If you're using, say, Java, there is jar files that are available, which you can refer in your project and utilize it. So we will be sticking with the C# part of it. So we will see how we can use it in a C# application. Now, when it comes to Selenium WebDriver, there is an interface called as iWebDriver. This interface provides certain common functionalities. Like there is a method for navigating to a given URL called as navigate. And this method again has one more method that we can call in or chain called as go to URL. So it takes a URL and redirects my browser to a specific URL. For example, if I give, say, google.com, so it will open google.com in my browser. Then there is a method called as close, which basically closes the current browser tab. If that is the only tab, it will close the window itself. Then there is a quit method, which is basically going to close my browser session, which was open, and it's going to close the entire browser window. It's going to dispose of the instance of my web driver. There are also properties, just like in every interface, we are going to have some properties and methods. Here also, there are few properties and methods. Like there is a property called as URL, which returns me the current URL of the web page, which was opened in my Selenium WebDriver. Similarly, there is a property here called as title. It is of type string, and it returns me the string of the title of the current web page which is open. Now, these methods and properties, they are going to remain same no matter which implementation of this web driver you're using. There are different implementations, like there is a Chrome driver, there is a Firefox driver, and there is an Edge driver, and so on. So all of these implementations are going to have the same set of methods. Even if you are going with, say, from C# to, say, JavaScript, you are again going to have these similar methods, but the naming convention will be different. I'm sure you are familiar, like in JavaScript, we use camel casing, right? So this go to URL, it will be camel cased over there. In case if you're using, say, JavaScript for writing your test, or say you're using Java for writing your test. Whereas in C#, it is Pascal cased. I hope you guys are aware. Okay. The presentation, the code, this application, all of it, I'm going to upload it on GitHub. I have kept my GitHub repository URL over here. Right. The entire presentation along with the code, I will put it here on GitHub. You can download it from there. Even this application that I'm showing over here, right? This contact form, that also I will upload there. And my solution, which I'm going to create for testing that contact form, that also I'll upload there. Okay, sure. Now this WebDriver, it basically also throws WebDriver exceptions. So you should be handling these exceptions. And when you're working with various elements, let's say you're looking for a text box which is not present on a page, it also throws no such element exception. So these are the two basic types of exceptions that you should be handling when you're writing the Selenium code. Again, this is going to be similar exceptions if you switch to other programming language like Java. Now, before we go ahead and write any test using WebDriver, we need to go ahead and find our elements, right? If I need to interact with this particular text box, if you see here, there are three different text boxes on my page, correct? This is one, this is another, and this is one more. So first thing is we should be able to locate a given control on my page. So for locating various elements on your page, Selenium provides different location strategies. So there are basically 8 traditional strategies that are available for searching these elements, but with Selenium version 4, there is also relative locators, which were previously called as friendly locators. What you're seeing on screen over here in this table, these are basically traditional location strategies. And there are 8 of them, but few of those are listed over here. So if you want to search an element, let me just go ahead and show you how these elements looks like. I'm right clicking on my web page here and I'm choosing view page source. If you see here, this is basically my HTML page, right? And you can see that there is a control for writing the name. If you see this control, it has a class attribute, it has a type attribute, it has an ID, and it also has a name, right? Similarly, if you see another one over here, it also has a class, it also has an ID, it also has a name. So if I need to search this particular element on my page, if I need to locate this particular element on my page, then I'll have to use one of the location strategies so that Selenium can look for this element and then we make interactions with it. To do that, there are different methods which are available. By is a class. It has a method called as ID that basically takes the ID of an element and returns me. It is called as ID locator. So if I need to find this element, I can go ahead and provide the value for this ID attribute, which is there, and it will search and find that particular element for me. Similarly, there is by.name method, which is going to take the name as the parameter, and it is going to find the element using that name. It's called as name locator. Same is true for class name. It basically takes a class name as the parameter, the CSS class name, and then it is going to find the elements using that class. It's called as class locator. There is also a tag locator. A tag locator basically searches an element based on the tag, like this is a tag, this is a tag, this is a tag, right? So it basically locates the element based on the tag, like this is also a tag. Then there is also link text locator, which basically locates elements based on the text of the hyperlink. You see here, there are two hyperlinks on my page. Let me scroll up. Yeah, this is one hyperlink to go to home page, and this is another hyperlink just is for going to the contact page. So if I want to search an element using the text of this hyperlink, this is the text. Again, I can use this link text locator and pass in the text for searching that element. Now there are more, like there is also CSS selector. There is also an XPath selector as part of traditional locations selectors. And if you're familiar with HTML and CSS, these are the same selectors that you use in CSS for targeting a given elements on a page. Now, locator is responsible for only locating an element, but we need to go ahead and find that element. We need to have a reference of that element so that we can manipulate it. So finders are used for identifying one or more elements on the page and obtaining its reference. That is, once you get the reference to a given element, you'll be able to modify it. So that reference is basically going to be returned in the form of iWeb element. There are two methods that you can use. These are part of the WebDriver class. There is find element, which takes a locator as parameter and returns me a single element. The first one which matches that locator, it will return me that. There is also find elements, which is going to return me all the elements which matches a given locator, and it is going to return me a collection of elements. Find returns me a single, find elements returns me a collection. Now, these collections are nothing but the implementation of iWeb element. And this iWeb element basically provides me again with a set of properties and methods. Like there is a property called as tag name, which gives me the name of the tag. For example, if I searched for this element using a locator and a finder, then if I try to access the tag name, I'm going to get input because that is the tag name. You can also get the text. Let's say, for example, using your finder, you retrieve that H1 element here. The text property will return you the content text, which is present inside this H1 so that you can work with it. There is also enabled, which will tell me whether a given element is enabled or disabled. I can also give some commands to these elements. Like there is a command called as click, which basically simulates the left click of your mouse as if a user is clicking. There's also send keys, which basically send some keystrokes to an input element like a text box or a text area or a password box. you can go ahead and send keys to it. There is also a clear method, which basically removes the text which is present in a text-based element. And then finally, we also have a submit so that we can trigger a form submit operation. DOM stands for Document Object Model, and it basically maintains a reference of all the elements which are present on your page, and through that you can manipulate those elements. All these controls which are present on my page, DOM maintains a reference to all these elements. Through that, I can modify them. Muhammad Shiraz. So, yeah, that's it for the presentation part. Now we will see an implementation of how we can test this application using Selenium. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio here, and I'll go back to Solution Explorer. Here I have one project in this solution. I'm going to add one more project. So I'll right click this solution and say add new project. For writing Selenium tests on your systems for .NET, you'll need a Visual Studio and a browser. Only two things are necessary for writing the Selenium test. One is Visual Studio, so that you can write the scripts for the test. Another one is browser, so that you can execute your test. Right. So here in my Visual Studio window, I'm going to choose C# as my language. Platforms, I'm going to keep it as all, but the type of project is test. So I'll go ahead and choose test. Now from this test projects, I'm going to choose NUnit test project. NUnit is a framework which allows you to write your tests, and you can go ahead and just a minute. Okay. So NUnit is a test framework that basically is used for writing tests in C#, and you can go ahead and write tests for various components of your application. We will be using NUnit here for creating our test suites. So I'll choose NUnit test project and I'll say next. Now, you have to give a project name here. I'm going to give this project a name as, say, contact form app underscore, say, automation S. This is the name I'm giving to this project, and the location is this. I'm fine with the location. And if you want to change the location, you can click on this browse button and give a new one. So I'll say next. Now we have different versions of .NET Framework. I have version 6 on my system as of now, so I'm going to choose version 6 and I'll say create. By default, I get one test. I don't want this one, so I'll just create my own. So here is my test project. There are two projects now. This is my MVC application and this is my test project. So in this test project, first of all, I need to install Selenium. So to install Selenium, I'm going to right click on dependencies and I'll say manage NuGet packages. Then we go on browse, and here we will look for Selenium. So we are going to install this Selenium WebDriver package. So we'll click on this, and here there is an install button. I'm going to click on that install button here. Say okay. Done. Next, I'm going to go to Selenium WebDriver.Chrome driver. I want to run my test in Chrome browser, so I'll choose Chrome. But there is also one for IE, and there is one, if you scroll down below, you'll also find for Firefox. Since I'm going to run it in Chrome, I'll be choosing the Chrome driver for Selenium and I'll say install. Okay. Done. Now, by default, I was having this unit test one. I don't want it. I'm going to delete that. Now, I'll go ahead and create my own unit test. So again, in my Solution Explorer, I'll right click my project name. I'll say add, say new item. And I'll give it a name, say contact form tests. I'm going to have multiple tests inside it. So I'm naming it as contact form tests. First of all, we get a class. I'm going to make this as public. Next, I'll be adding few namespaces here. One is using NUnit dot framework, using OpenQA dot Selenium, and using OpenQA dot Selenium dot Chrome. Now, these namespaces, they basically contains the classes that I need for writing my test. So I'm including these namespaces in my file. Next, to write a test, we have to create a method. So I'm going to create a method and add it with the attribute called as test. Public void, say check Google dot. The basic test that I'm going to write, wherein I'm going to check whether Google is going to open using Selenium WebDriver or not. So I'll create one object here called as driver. This is the object name. And this object will be for the Chrome driver. Since we are going to use Chrome as our browser, this is for Chrome driver. Then I want to visit Google. So I'll say driver dot navigate dot go to URL, and we specify the URL that we want to open. So here I'm going to say .google.com. Then I'll say driver.quit. So I'll just open Google and I will close the driver, which will basically close my Chrome window as well. And I'll say assert.pass. We'll just say that if all these things happen successfully, my test has successfully passed. Now, I've written a basic test over here, which simply opens google.com and then closes the Selenium Chrome driver, which makes my test as passed. I want to run this test. So to run this test, we go to test menu. We have something called as test explorer. Under test explorer, you can see my test is appearing here. But let's check Google. I'll right click and say run. So as you can see, it is opening the browser. It is opening google.com and it is closing that as well. And you can see my test is showing over here green. And you can even see in test summary over here, right? So this test has successfully passed. If the test failed, then I will get a red error over here. You can see a cross mark in red color, like the one which you're seeing over here. All right, now I want to go ahead and write a test for this web page that I have. I want to open this web page and I want to see whether I'm getting this particular text for let's contact us and this title that we have here, contact, whether it is successfully opening or not. So I'm going to copy this URL and write one more test. So here, one more method I will create for one more test. Say public void open contact page. And once again, we'll create our Chrome driver and we'll say driver.navigate. Say go to URL and here we'll put in that URL that we have. Now I want to check whether this page is successfully opening or not. So to do that, I can verify this title of my web page over here. You see this web page has a title tag here. I want to check whether that title tag is appearing properly or not. We can even see the title here. I'm not sure it is visible to you or not. Let me just take the highlighter here. You can see there is a title, right? Called contact. I want to go ahead and check whether that title is appearing properly or not. So we go back and we'll see web title equals to, we'll say driver dot title. The web driver has a title property. I'm going to retrieve its value. Then if this value is equal to contact, that means the page that is opened is indeed the contact page. So here I can say assert dot say that title is equal to contact. So if this assertion fails, that means some other page has opened. If this assertion passes, that means the correct page has been opened and my test is passed successfully. Yeah. Driver dot wait. I'll come to that. Just a minute. So there, let us see whether this test is going to pass or not. I'm going to go to test and I'm going to open Test Explorer. And here is the test. This test was never run. I'm going to go ahead and run it. As you can see, the test is successfully passed. Let me make a small change. I'm going to make a spelling mistake over here. And let's see what happens when this test is run this time. Okay, so let's say run. This time, if you see here, my test has failed, right? It is not able to find that particular title. Instead, there is a mismatch between the title that I have and the title that was open, right? Okay. Yes, I intentionally made it so that we see whether our tests are properly working or not. Arul Kumar. I think it will be shared with you, you will have to check with the team who has scheduled this session. Okay, one more test and we will stop with that. There is one question over here, how we can open a tab. I will share you a link, Venkatesh, right? I'll share you a link on that. Let me continue with the demo. Okay, now I'm going to test here, say public void, say contact page submission test. Okay, so this time we are going to test our contact page for submission. So once again, we're going to start by creating our WebDriver. Now, once I create my WebDriver, I will have to go ahead and interact with these three controls, right? For interacting with these controls, I'm going to use locators and finders. So we'll go back over here and we'll say var, say name. Okay, first of all, we have to navigate to our contact page. So here's the line of code that does that for me. I'm going to copy that and paste it. And now I'm going to go ahead and locate and manipulate elements. So I'll say driver, var name text box equals to say driver dot find element. This is the method. Now it requires a locator. So I'll say by dot. I'm going to find that text box using its ID. You see here, if I right click and say inspect, once again, let me redo it, inspect. You can see that this control has an ID attribute with the value as name. So using this name, I can find it. I'll say, give me the control which has the attribute called as name. And then I'll change its values. So here I'll say name text box dot send keys. And I'll give it some values, say maybe my name. Right. Similarly, I'm going to go ahead and find other two text boxes and change their values. This is one more. And if you pay attention, this second text box, if I right click on it and say inspect element, it has an ID called as email. So once again, I can go ahead and say, give me the text box with the ID email, and my variable name is going to be email text box. And for the email text box, we are going to send some text for it. That will be my email address. Lastly, we'll find the last one. Okay, so the last text box, again, if I say inspect element, it also has an ID called as message. Let's use that. Let's say, give me the text box with this ID, and I'm going to name the control as message text box. And value is going to be, say, hello, Selenium. Right. So I find a text box, change its value. I find a text box, again, change its value. I find a text box and change its value. Now, finally, I want to submit this form. So for submitting this form, again, I can go ahead and find this button here. This button again has, okay, it's not having any ID. It has a class. I can use that class for finding it, or I can do a trigger for submitting any one of these elements. So I can go ahead and say name text box dot say submit. It basically submits the form which is in which this text box is present. And once this form is submitted, basically it redirects me to another page. So let me just do it over here, say demo, demo, and demo. send message. If you see here, it redirects me to another page, and that page has a different title here. You can see the title is contact success. I can check for that title, right? So remove that. So here I can say var title equals to driver dot title. I'll store it in one variable, and then I'll check assert that title value is equal to contact space success. So if this is happening, that means I'm successfully being redirected to that page. I can quit my driver finally. Let's go back to Test Explorer and run this test as well, right? Well, so as you can see, it was typing everything, submitting the form, and it was going to that page and then close my driver. Not just that, I can also go ahead and check whether that page is giving me the proper, like if we just go ahead and say, hello, there is a message coming out, right? So I can also check whether this message is being displayed properly or not. In that message, we have this email address as well, right? I can test that as well. So if you see, this message is coming inside an H1. If you see here, there is an H1. So I can search this H1, then I can search for this text inside that H1. So let me first copy this text till here, because this email address is going to change based on what user has specified. Let me copy. And again, I can search for one more element, say var H1 text equals to say driver dot find element by dot tag name. This time I'm going to use the tag name H1, because if you see here, this element does not have any ID, it's not having any class. So we are going to search it based on tag name. So I'm going to get it using tag name, and then I'll say assert that this H1 text dot text capital H. So the text property of this H1 element is, say, equals to this. So here I've used this email address, so it should be exactly the same email address. I should get that as my text, right? So this time, if these two assertions, that is, I get the title as contact success and I get an H1 as thank you for contacting us, our team will reach out to you on this email address. If I get these two messages, these two assertions passed, then only my test will pass. Otherwise, my test will fail. So let us see whether this time the test will pass or not. So we'll go to Test Explorer again. And we right click on this same test. Actually, this time I'll run all three of them. No, we cannot. Srikant, we cannot change that message. We can use XPath also, Bhuvaneshwari, for locators. It is possible to use that. You'll have to check with Vinod, Rahul. So all of my tests has passed. One last thing before we end this, you can see 3 times it is opening and closing Chrome, right? I may not want that. I want this Chrome window to be opened once, and all these 3 tests should be executed in that same window, right? So how can we achieve that? For doing that, we can pass it as test case data. The NUnit has this test case and test case source, using which you can pass some values to as parameters to this method, and then within this method you can pass as parameters to your test. Aravind, I hope I'm able to answer that. So I'm going to create something called as setup, a one-time setup. So one setup method and one-time tear down. Okay, so 2 methods I'm creating. These 2 methods are different than my test methods. The responsibility of these 2 methods is going to be, this method should create the driver and this method should dispose the driver. So that before my test starts, the driver is created, and after my tests are executed, the drivers is destroyed. So that I don't have to open this driver multiple times and close it multiple times. So here I can say WebDriver, say driver, and I can initialize it here. So driver equals to new Chrome driver. And in this one, I can quit it. Say driver dot quit. So before my tests are executed, a driver will be created. Then all 3 of the tests will be executed one by one. And once all 3 of the tests are executed, the driver will be quit. That means it will be disposed. So I no longer have to create or close my driver here. Same thing for this one. Here. Now this time if I run it, it will not open 3 different Chrome windows one by one. It is going to use one single Chrome session to execute all 3 of my tests. So let me go to Test Explorer. Right click and say run all 3 of them. The first test, the second one, and the third one, right? All 3 are executed. This time in a single Chrome session instead of 3 different sessions, because one-time tear down. The one-time setup is a method which basically executes before your test. Whereas one-time tear down, it will execute one time after all the tests are executed. If you see here, this class has 3 tests, right? This is one, this is another, and this is another. 3 different tests are present. So when I'm saying one time, that means execute only once. So before any of these 3 tests is executed, once this method will run, then all of the tests will execute. Then once this method will execute. As the name suggests, they execute only one time, either before the test or after the test. Now, if this class is having 10 different tests, then this one will execute once before any of the tests, and this one will execute after all 10 of them. So that's it for this session, guys. Thank you for joining. If you're having any queries, you can reach out to me. There is equivalent demand for Java and .NET. You can do debugging the way with the help of a debugger, like you can set a breakpoint and go ahead and do debugging like you generally do in C Sharp. Thank you, Keshav. Yes, it is possible to not prioritize. You can order these tests. There are attributes over here like order. You can control the order in which these tests are executed. Bhuvaneshwari. That is not related to Selenium. That is related to NUnit. Even there was a question related to passing the data to the test. You can go ahead and pass the data to the test using this test case or test source attribute as well. You're welcome, guys. So this PPT, you can find all the PPT and the code. I'm just putting it here on this GitHub. You can just search for this user ID on GitHub, Techie Sayed, and you'll find this code over there along with the PPT. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, you can generate the test reports using NUnit. You can even have test coverage reports as well. NUnit is a testing framework, which basically is used for, can we do automation? We can do automation testing for APIs. Postman is a more suitable tool for that. The question here as well. Sohail, recording, you will have to check with Vinod, the organizer of today's meeting. He will be able to share the recording with you. Only thing that will be available on this URL is, guys, the code and this presentation, not the recording. It can be arranged, Sneha. If you're doing Sumit, if you're doing using, say, Java as your programming language, you can use Eclipse. If you're using Visual Studio, if you're choosing .NET as your tool, then you use Visual Studio. Selenium website itself has very nice documentation that you can refer to, Nitin. NUnit is part of XUnit tools. There is a variation of it called as JUnit for Java. The version of Selenium you can check while installing the Selenium WebDriver through NuGet package manager. When we are installing, we can check that. Just a minute. You can use Visual Studio Code as well instead of Visual Studio. It is possible to do that. People were asking me for the URL. I'm going to put the code over here. See, there is this MVVM with WPF, right? Beside that, the Selenium will appear. Just keep this URL with you. Yes, exactly. Jamila, NUnit for C#, JUnit for Java. Here you can check when you are installing these packages, right? You have an option to choose the version. So See, 4.9.1 is the one that I have installed here. Arun, right? You can see the which version I have installed, right? You can redirect to any website, Saurabh, using Selenium. I only have one playlist there, MVVM, that's all. Here you do it using a NuGet package manager, right? Here, if you go to update, right? Now, what happens is any updates that are available, it will list over here. Whatever updates that are available, like there is an update available for this package, I can just choose over here and then click on update. Any new sessions that are required, you'll have to get in touch with the organizer, Jamila. Automate graphs. Can you please elaborate, Ankita? Yes, you can. See, it's basically like, checking whether a particular image is drawn successfully on a canvas or not. But you cannot go ahead and check the points within that graph. You should start with this one, unit testing, and then you go ahead and switch to integration testing, automation testing, and so on. The point of starting Durga Bhavani, it's unit testing because these frameworks like NUnit is covered during unit tests. So we have seen how we can, what is Selenium, what is automation testing, and how we can go ahead and create our own automation test using Selenium, how to set up Selenium environment in Visual Studio. And we have also seen how to create our Selenium tests for the contact form that we have seen in the beginning. So that's all for this session, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Vinod, can we close this?
Hello? Yes, I can.
Ashish, recording will be shared by Vinod. Just get in touch with the panelist, right? Thank you.